Hi, this is Zway Kwok from Calm Clarity, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, Cindi Boesler from the Calm Clarity Board. Welcome, Cindi.
Thank you, Zway. So nice to be here with you.
So today is January 2nd, 2025. We're about to kick off this new year. What are your thoughts on what you want more of or what you want to see more of in 2025?
So the whole, the framework and the conversations that we've had, the fruit of the work of the things that I've learned at Calm Clarity is that when that things don't have to be so hard, and we can tap into kind of what I like to call our soul goals, or those goals that are most meaningful to us. And mine are not so much goals as far as outcome, but how can I go through the daily process of life, in how can I meet life with a little bit more ease and more flow and more joy and more um, compassion, and just have an experience of life no matter what the circumstances are, because the circumstances um, are varied and they're mixed, and some are very horrendous. My heart's very heavy with what just happened in New Orleans yesterday, and I think we're all, um, you know, um, burdened, and there's just a lot of heaviness out in the world right now. But what I'd like to do is to recognize that I don't need to add any more suffering um, to myself, self-imposed suffering. And so my intention, I guess, is just to lean into the work that um, we've been doing here at Calm Clarity, and just continuing the practices and creating more space for more ease and more flow and more joy, and just appreciate the moments that I can. So those are my
Great.
personal intentions for 2025.
Thank you for sharing that. And I totally resonate about um, seeing and acknowledging the heaviness that's out in the world and greeting 2025 both with anticipation and eagerness, but also knowing that there's a lot of pain and there's a lot of turmoil. And, I have, um, what I often ask for is the wisdom to know what I can and cannot do, and how do I elevate my consciousness so that I can greet what's happening with compassion and be able to make a positive impact rather than, as you were saying, add to the suffering that's in the world. And so, when we talk about calm clarity, we usually present it as a user manual for steering brain development and for rewiring your brain for greater wisdom, fulfillment, and joy. But given the state of the world today and how much turmoil there is because of political uncertainty, economic uncertainty, technological disruption, climate change causing changes in agriculture, right, leading to food shortages, there's a lot of reason why people are anxious. And the only way for us to solve these issues, to rise to these challenges, is to learn how to elevate our consciousness so we can consciously co create the solutions that we all need to experience collective prosperity. And thank you so much for saying yes to being part of this conversation. And what I'd like to do now is turn to scientists, like I usually do. And the scientist that comes to mind is Albert Einstein, for giving us his unique perspective on consciousness.
Yes, let's dive in.
So, Albert Einstein, he said, a human being is a part of the whole, called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences himself, his thoughts, and his feelings as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his consciousness. Not to nourish the delusion, but to try to overcome it, is the way to reach the attainable measure of peace of mind. And I find it so powerful that this person who's the originator of the theory of relativity, one of the fathers of modern physics, would call separation an optical delusion of consciousness, right?
Mhm.
It's
Yes,
such
pretty profound.
a way to phrase that. And then when the atomic bomb became a threat to the world, he said a new type of thinking is essential if mankind is to survive and move to higher levels. Past thinking and methods did not prevent world wars. Future thinking must prevent wars. And he's saying this as someone who was in Germany watching Hitler rise. And there's a certain type of thinking that lead to wars even. And there's a need to change the way we think. It's not exactly clear what he means, but then he also said the mind can proceed only so far upon what it knows and can prove. There comes a point where the mind takes a leap, call it intuition or what you will, and comes out upon a higher plane of knowledge, but can never prove how it got there. All great discoveries have involved such a leap. And this includes his big discovery of mass energy equivalence, E equals mc squared. And that profoundly changed physics. And since then, it's led scientists to conceptualize consciousness itself as a form of matter or energy. And so we have this book by Colin McGinn as a physicist and philosopher describing how to think about consciousness as just another form of matter, and that matter and energy is the underlying substance of the universe. And it may ultimately be unitary, but it can take widely different forms, with consciousness as just one of them. More recently, the American Institutes of Physics had a conference where physicists modeled consciousness to explain how it interfaces with the brain and interacts with matter and energy. And so people are now trying to understand what about the human brain allows us to interact with consciousness in a different way from other forms of consciousness, right? From other beings. This is really powerful. And I find maybe it's helpful to now go to Max Planck, right? And he himself, another Nobel Prize winner in physics, was the originator of quantum theory. And we have Planck's constant named in honor of him for being the first to calculate it. And so he said, as a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about the atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. And this was translated from German into English. It's interesting because they're saying some force is what holds the atom and the universe together, right? And it could be consciousness. And so, as a person who loves science, math and science taught me to try to look at things using X and Y axes, right? And so if I try to map the Y axes as gradations of consciousness and energy, we can say it starts at the bottom being dense and murky, and it goes up to the top being subtle and radiant. And it's probably impossible for a human being to have the language to describe what it's like at the top of this scale, right? And so, for lack of a better word, I'm going to borrow a word I've often seen: source. And this proposes that all consciousness comes from this source. And people who've had experience of peak consciousness often describe it as oneness, as a type of unity consciousness, right? As we heard earlier. And yet, at some point, this unity consciousness differentiates into all the matter of the universe, into a collective consciousness. It's like two sides of one coin. There's the ability to experience oneness and the ability to experience separation and individuality, as Einstein talked about. And because human beings somehow are the result of this consciousness evolving in some way, we don't really know or understand it, yet we exist as a manifestation of it, right? And so as we look at this, we have to be humble and admit our physical brain doesn't have the capacity to understand source. There's some limit to what we can comprehend. And just as there's a limit to what a 5-year-old can understand, what a 10-year-old could understand, a grown human being also has a limit to what they can understand. And yet, as Einstein said, all breakthroughs result from leaping through this limit temporarily, right? And throughout time, people, artists, musicians, inventors, scientists, philosophers, writers have talked about eureka moments, insights that come to them, solutions out of nowhere, right? In a dream or in the shower or on a walk. These downloads and transmissions have led to breakthroughs in medicine and research, have allowed scientists to picture DNA as a double helix, right? They've allowed scientists to understand the electron orbits within an atom, right? There's no other explanation for how they found this, except people themselves describing it as a download, as some type of transmission they received, some type of message that comes in a dream, right? And so as we think about this, I find it helpful to return to Einstein describing this in a very humble way. He said, the human mind, no matter how highly trained, cannot grasp the universe. We are in the position of a little child entering a huge library whose walls are covered to the ceiling with books in many different tongues. The child knows that someone must have written those books. It does not know who or how. It does not understand the languages in which they are spoken. The child notes a definite plan in the arrangement of the books, a mysterious order which it does not comprehend, but only dimly suspects. We see a universe marvelously arranged, obeying certain laws, but we understand the laws only dimly. Our limited minds cannot grasp the mysterious force that sways the constellations. And so, isn't that powerful?
Oh, it's so powerful. We can't grasp, but we do get insights of it when we wake up to pay attention to it. So that's what's so cool is even though we're not sophisticated enough or knowledgeable enough to really understand how all of it works, we are continually given opportunities to witness and experience it.
Yeah, and I love this metaphor of the library. There are thousands and thousands of books. Like we can't even understand the language the books are in. It's important for us to be humble and admit we don't know what we don't know. And yet, for me, like when I look out at the stars and the constellations, there's a part of me that is so inspired to understand what it is to be a human being. And if we are made of star material, what does that mean? Right. And so, as someone who thinks about the brain and tries to build a user manual for the brain, I've talked for now like a dozen years about the calm clarity framework as being different ways that our default mode network functions, right? And the default mode network is a core part of the brain that helps us to simulate reality, right? It builds an internal model of how the world works. And then we experience it as an inner narrator commenting on what we're going through, right? And it can talk to us in different patterns of brain activation. But what if this default mode network is really part of a bio-telecommunication system? What if the way it picks things up, the messages that it reflects back, reveal what level of consciousness it's tuning into? And so when we are in what I call brain 1.0, a state of self preservation, the default mode network settles for surviving, and it's at this lower state of consciousness or lower level of consciousness. And then when we're in brain 2.0, the default mode network fixates on feeling good, on chasing rewards, on doing things that we hope will improve our ability to survive, right? But it's not at a very high level of consciousness. It's transmitting these social conditioning that makes us feel like we're not enough. We have to keep striving, right? And then when we're in brain 3.0, our default mode network is tuning into higher vibrations, higher levels of consciousness that guide us to bring out our best selves, to lift up and to inspire people, right? What if Brain 3.0 is a bridge to even higher levels of consciousness where the breakthroughs that Einstein describes come from, right? And so if we come back to this picture and we add this in, we'll see that where the collective field, you could say, is dense and murky. That's Brain 1.0 and Brain 2.0. That's where they function in picking up signals. Brain 3.0 will pick up signals from higher levels of consciousness and serve as a bridge to superconsciousness. And to the degree that people strengthen and develop the neural structures of Brain 3.0, they can access greater and greater superconsciousness. Their brain limits are higher. And throughout history, human beings have done so many things to push past this limit, right? They meditate, they pray, they take psychedelics, right? They're whirling dervishes, there's fasting. I mean, there's rituals and traditions across the world to try to break through the physical brain limit. Throughout history, human beings have experimented with different methods to push past the physical brain limit, to push the boundaries. And I think the reason why this is important is because we're recognizing that some higher being, some higher form of consciousness is evolving through taking life as human beings, through taking birth into a human body, right? And this is beyond our capacity to really understand. It's still a great mystery, but this higher self is beyond this physical brain limit. Our brains will not allow us to understand what it's like to be this higher self. However, to the degree that we build Brain 3.0, we experience guidance from this higher self as what I call an inner sage, right? This inner sage represents our capacity to align ourselves with this higher self, right? Now, because we live in this collective field of humanity where there's a lot of social conditioning and stories and narratives that might separate us from our higher selves, we get lost in what I call a field of entanglement with our fears, with our chasing of rewards, with our social conditioning to believe we need to fight fire with fire, that it's a dog eat dog world, that we have to run the rat race, that we have to play the game, we have to be this way, you have to be tough. All the things that we tell ourselves we have to do to survive, all this social conditioning makes us see each other as opponents, right? As competitors, as threats to each other, rather than as sacred representations of this higher consciousness, right? And so for many people, they can get lost with these stories and become very anxious and very fearful and not experience joy, not experience love, not experience oneness. Is that something that resonates with you?
Oh, totally. And I think it's interesting. It's like our brains have been wired to acknowledge fear, right? When fear comes up or something that's fearful to us grabs our attention and holds it much more so than something not fearful, right? So there's a tendency for survival, right? That's been wired into us from the beginning to keep us safe. The conditioning now, what we're getting so many inputs through social media and the news system and all around us that is perpetuating this fear, right? And so what's so cool about your illustration is we can just continue to get more and more entangled into this toxic stress, and we wonder why we're feeling so weighed down and feeling so afraid of what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I mean, it's important that we recognize it's these stories that keep us trapped and keep us entangled. And it's important to step back from these stories, but it's hard, right? Until you recognize that you're choosing these stories and putting energies into them. And what I've seen is, having gone to Harvard and Wharton, is that there are overachievers who may not be so focused on what they're afraid of. They're focused much more on striving towards what they want, right? And so, to the degree that their inner sage guides them to get what they're chasing, they listen. And when it guides them to do something that doesn't lead to more money or more success, they often don't listen, right? These are the people I see going to temple, going to synagogue, going to church, praying for money, praying for prosperity, praying for success, right? It's not that this is a bad thing. It's just to them, that's all there is because they're in tunnel vision.
They think that those things are going to bring them to the fulfillment and the joy, right? That's the conditioning that most of us go through at some point, is
Mm-hmm.
that we think the achievement, we think the acquisition is of resources is what's going to be the answer. Then I'll be happy.
Because these tangles are so strong, they're unable to see that there's so much else out there, right? And when they get what they want, they feel happy and content. And when they don't get what they want, they can easily move into A, right? And
And I think
experience that.
too, what happens is that the reason they stay so entangled, it's like you get a momentary hit with the dopamine, right? Of achieving whatever it is you set out for. But then your brain, default mode network, right, immediately jumps in and starts offering that you need to attain the next thing and the next thing. So you never really get any lasting peace or measure of happiness or joy or contentment when you're in that pattern.
Yes, I totally agree. And that's an important observation. And I think you're reflecting back something you and I have both experienced, having worked our way up, different corporate ladders and seeing that even though we did what we were told, we rose into higher positions, we didn't break this pattern. We were still feeling a sense of emptiness, right? And so that's when my life shifted and I began to put much more energy and attention towards building Brain 3.0. For the people who do this figure C represents a stronger connection to your inner sage, to your higher self. And when we do the work of building the neural structures of Brain 3.0, we're able to identify, to recognize when we're triggered and we're getting swept up in stories that further activate Brain 1.0 and Brain 2.0 and could lead to toxic stress. We decide to let those stories go, right? We decide to untangle ourselves from those stories to release them and to liberate ourselves from them, right? And not keep energizing them. And by doing that, we allow ourselves to elevate even further. As we learn to do this, we experience this concept in Sanskrit called Sharanagati, which translates as spiritual conductivity and energy transmutation. And what that means, and the way I learned it when I was living in Asia, is that the more entangled you are, the more resistance you experience, right? You're not conductive in the sense that you cannot access transmissions from source, right? There's a limit to what your biotransmission system can pick up, right? And to the degree that you develop Brain 3.0 and you disentangle yourself from this field, you become more conductive and you can access higher levels of consciousness, right? And your energy field itself expands as you elevate, move towards what I call higher self actualization, where you become more and more aligned with your higher self, and some argue your true self, right? Which is still beyond my physical brain limit to fully understand. So I won't go that far. But what I would say is when they say you can be in the world, but not of the world, what they're describing is a human being who is able to move through the field of entanglement without becoming entangled, without energizing these stories and getting lost into toxic stress, right? And I think that's really powerful to recognize any person can experience these figures, what they represent toxic stress, tunnel vision, being wise and attuned, and being higher self actualized, perhaps just for a few moments. And it's has to do with our state of mind and where we're focusing energy and attention. Actually, this is an image that comes to me when I meditate, and it's been coming to me since 2012. When I look out at the world and I see the field of entanglement, this image allows me to go through the world, try to listen to the guidance of my inner sage to release these tangles, to move towards D, right? It's not easy to do because it's so easy to get caught up in how other people trigger us and then become part of co creating more stress, losing the bigger picture, getting lost in tunnel vision, letting our attachments move us into toxic stress.
Just if I could add, one of the components of the trainings that you do teaches us that we have these four systems. And one of the systems is the meta awareness system. And what I think is so powerful about this slide and the training is when you can identify what's happening in the cocoon of toxic stress, right? It's hard to break free. You're in bondage. At least that's how my mind looks at it. It's in bondage of this stress. And when you start moving and applying the work and you have the glimmers of wise and attuned, sometimes you can then have so much more compassion and empathy for those around you who are acting out from that place of toxic stress. It's not as personal anymore. And so it's very healing, not only to yourself to be free, liberating to go through this process, but you also can hold so much more compassion and not make other people's actions mean something about yourself. So this has just been such a powerful image for me as well.
Thank you for sharing that. And that leads into the next slide. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is that for a lot of people, when we interact, our default mode network transmit our entanglements to each other, right? So if you're interacting in brain 1.0 or brain 2.0, you're experiencing, unhealthy conflict or avoidance. You see other people in a very competitive way or in a very transactional way. You don't really see them as human beings. And then there's a lot of domination or resentment. right? You don't feel empowered. A lot of the interactions feel like it's win or lose. But then when we elevate our consciousness into Brain 3.0, what we can do is share, like you just said, empathy and compassion, inspiration and support. And when we meet other people in Brain 3.0, there can be powerful collaborations, right? There's a whole different level of creativity that gets unleashed. And it's important to recognize that by elevating our consciousness, right, we're able to also spread higher consciousness to the world around us, right? And the person who we interact with, who's in Brain 1.0 or Brain 2.0, as they interact with us in our presence, they start to change as well, right? And it might not be right away. By not getting entangled with them, we make it easier for them to unentangle themselves too, right?
And I think what occurs through this process is that we start to see that we have choices, how we want to respond, what we want to listen to with our inner narrator, and then choosing. And and so yes, it's super powerful
Yeah.
framework.
And one of the important things is to see ourselves as biofeedback systems, right? And when we're in Brain 1.0 and Brain 2.0, we're disconnected. We've given in to that illusion of separation. But even internally, our hearts and minds are closed and dissociated. And when we are experiencing oneness, you could say, when we see other people as one with source, just as we are experiencing openness. Our heart and mind are integrated because we're aligning with our higher selves, right? And that's very powerful to know that you can feel whether your field is open or contracted and tangled up because of the way your body's contracting, or your body's opening, relaxing, and expanding. And so, this is where I think it's really important to talk about Gandhi. Gandhi is known for saying, be the change you wish to see in the world. And he actually said something much longer that that's a paraphrase of. And so this is the longer version of what he said. We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do. This is basically an invitation to become a conscious co creator, right? And what he's illustrating is something I'm trying to capture in the next set of images. And what he's saying is, as we transform our own consciousness, we transform the collective field, as we transform our own field. And so, what I am illustrating here on the left is our planet with a collective field in turmoil, because all these human beings in Brain 1.0 or Brain 2.0 are mindlessly co creating suffering. And then, what is possible is the image on the right, our planet with a healthy, vibrant collective field. And this happens when human beings in Brain 3.0 consciously co create flourishing. And our task as a species is to move from this to this by learning how to elevate our consciousness, by building the networks of Brain 3.0. And you could
Yes.
say that an individual person's field could look like this or like this as well, right? This is what A probably looks like, you know, and this is what we're trying to illustrate with the person in figure D, right? What their field probably looks like. And
What's so powerful about those images is just the reminder, if we remember who we really are at the core of ourselves before we get entangled in all the conditioning and all of the stressors out there in the world, if we just do the work of freeing and liberating ourselves as best we can through these practices and understandings, that's the work. And to think that if we would all just be responsible for our own energy that we're putting out and transmitting together, if we would just do that work, we could change the experience of life as we know it collectively.
Yes, that's so beautiful and so powerful. And so here's where I want to start inviting people to take this journey. I believe as we move towards higher self-actualization, there are three primary stages that everyone has to go through. And so here at Calm Clarity, we've been trying to build our lead in alignment and wholeness program around these stages. And so the first stage is foundation, meaning you have to learn your autopilot. You have to recognize its patterns. How do these patterns impact your interactions, your effectiveness, and your well being? And then the next step, as you were saying, Cindi, is to strengthen the four key neural systems that support alignment and wholeness. And these are the systems for attention, resilience, meta awareness, and connection. But then this is just knowledge until you apply it into your everyday life. And that's what aligning means. It means increasing the alignment between your autopilot, how you actually are 99% of the time as you go through your life, and your higher self, the person you aspire to become and actualize. And this means integrating rather than rejecting your own brain 1.0 and brain 2.0 because they function as key elements of your inner GPS. Brain 1.0 helps you assess risk. Brain 2.0 helps you assess reward. But the key is, does your brain 3.0 help you discern how much time, attention, and energy those risks and rewards warrant? Are they helping support you to fulfill your greater life purpose, or do they distract you from that? And so Brain 3.0 has to help oversee how you use your attention, time, and energy, right? So you don't just get swept up in Brain 1.0 or Brain 2.0. And that's what happens as we move into conscious co creation. You work on bringing alignment and presence into your interactions by deepening your ability to attune to and connect with people in the present moment in a higher state of consciousness, right? And when you're able to do this, your own higher self is going to ask you to envision and co create systems, processes, organizations, and institutions that support collective thriving, prosperity, and well being. And what we want to do is help you build that connection and alignment with your higher self. And so, with the Calm Clarity Lead in Alignment and Wholeness program, what we want to do is help you start this journey so you can experience yourself as a conscious co creator rather than someone who unconsciously co creates suffering. It's important for anyone who wants to start this journey to understand that it's not linear. It actually unfolds like a cyclical spiral. And so, whenever you build your foundation, right, you then have to align and then you use it to consciously co create, but then you reach your limits and you want to continue to grow. So you strengthen and expand your foundation, you align and integrate more of your autopilot, and then you just keep going up and up through the spiral. And it basically looks like this. You go up the spiral when you align, you start to consciously co create, and you reach your limits. And then you have to build your foundation, which means growing downward to shift to the next stage of the spiral. And then you keep going. So that journey from A to B to C to D could be thousands and thousands of spirals, right? Little spirals that make up big spirals. It's a mystery, right? How you break it down. But all I know is it does feel like you're making progress until you stop. you get frustrated, and you have to look at the limits of your autopilot and how do you expand the limits of your autopilot to bring higher consciousness to more situations that you encounter, right? And then you keep continuing this journey, bringing more alignment and more wholeness into different aspects of your life. And it's really powerful and it's really meaningful because every time you go through this spiral, you're transforming your field and you actually can see an impact on your own family, on your own community, on the people who interact with you. Cindi, do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I think I'd like to add that the energy just changes and shifts. And I know my brain 2.0, I like to call it Sisyphus, who's always pushing the boulder up the hill and doing everything in my will and in my strength. And that's exhausting. And what you start to discover is when you enter in the field of conscious co-creation is that there's an ease about the process of life. Things just show up for you. You see how they serve you. Your ability to, even when you're hit with circumstances of life that drag you down again, that challenge you in a big way, that throw you into brain 1.0 in fear or brain 2.0 of struggle to try to get myself out of this situation, you start developing awareness and you remember, oh, yeah, I've been here before, and there is an easier way of letting things flow. And I'm going to tap into that energy. And you remember sooner every time you go through it.
What I experience as you describe that is this acknowledgement that when I try to get something done or force something to be done the way I want in Brain 2.0, it often leads to more stress, right? It often leads to more anxiety and more anguish. And if I allow Sharanagati, the sense of surrender, and see things from a higher perspective, it's almost like being like water. You learn to flow with it and allow it to guide you to become a better person. It makes it easier for you to embody the qualities of your higher self and transmit that into the situation rather than the qualities of Brain 2.0, which is control, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
force. I find often when I'm elevating consciousness instead of trying to control things, downloads happen that allow me to solve the problem with greater ease. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. So for me, it's become less is more, which is really refreshing. Uh, so it's contagious. It is just a wonderful way in which, like, one of your systems is focus, and then another system is meta awareness of, oh, what am I focusing on? And so when you can start to zoom out and see, you can choose, do I want to continue to focus and do things in this manner that's creating this sensation in my body? And so what's so cool is that we have been created with these systems that if we would only just pay attention and tune back in, um, the information that we receive from our body to steer us in the direction that we should go, that's easy and fulfilling and joyful and creating more love in our lives and our world. It's just fascinating. So, for me, this has just been an experience of remembering who I really am at the deepest um, part of me and how I am so wonderfully made that if I just tune into and understand and practice and play, I will actually, discover the keys to joy and fulfillment and liberation. So This has just been such a rewarding opportunity to participate with with this framework.
I'm glad you're enjoying your journey so far.
It's not without its challenges, but
But I would say, I think of my life like before calm clarity, before I set off to India to try to understand, like, why are we here? And is there more to life than just running the rat race and climbing the corporate ladder? And I had no idea how much more there was to discover. And I'm so glad I did that. And I feel like when I look back at the person I used to be, when I was living mostly, in toxic stress and tunnel vision, right? Versus the person I am now, doing my best to embody my higher self and transmit, into the collective field a higher level of consciousness. I understand how important it was that I experienced, being figure A and being figure B. I wouldn't want that to be 100% of my life anymore, right? And when you get to
no,
experience
absolutely.
what it's like to be going up these spirals involve experiencing oneness with source and experience yourself as a conscious co-creator. And there is so much more purpose and meaning and significance and sacredness in every interaction with a human being. As you can see, there is this consciousness within them too, that by building our own Brain 3.0, we can reflect back to them, right? And so, one of the most powerful ways to support people and connect with people in Brain 3.0 is to learn how to listen to them, to create that container and that space for deepening connection and understanding. For anyone who wants to start this journey and experience what it's like to be surrounded in Brain 3.0, I'd like to invite people to come and join our next workshop on mindful listening to deepen connection and understanding, which is going to be on February 20th from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern time. And hopefully, we'll be able to post more workshop dates soon for people to experience this workshop throughout the year.
It's just an important life skill. You can never practice it enough, but it really helps us reconnect with ourselves and have more compassion for ourselves too. That's one of the benefits that I have been discovering. And I think it's through this connection system that you refer to. So many of us feel alone and separated. And this whole process really helps to show us you can find deep connection with most people that you interact with if you're willing to just lean in and use some of the skills that we practice at this workshop.
Yeah, I think the breakthrough people experience here is in this workshop, we actually explain how your default mode network can help you mindfully listen or distract you from mindful listening, right? And create even more separation and disconnection. And so a lot of this is learning how to listen in Brain 3.0, but also being aware when you might be listening in Brain 1.0 or Brain 2.0. And it's when we listen in Brain 3.0 that we're deepening connection and understanding. For anyone who's ready to become a conscious co-creator, we'd love to invite you to join a foundation program cohort. We'll be running cohorts in the spring and the fall in 2025. Cindi, as you know, there's financial barriers that often keep people from shining their light in the world. And so our board has been doing our best to build a model where we offer sliding scale scholarships so people of all backgrounds can join our programs at a price they can afford.
We're all here for a reason to heal the world, and we're all designed to contribute at our highest and best, right? I mean, so if we are all one, we all have a part to play, and freeing ourselves from the field entanglement help us to remember who we are and what brings us joy and just liberating from the cocoon of fear would just be a powerful outcome of
Hmm.
our work.
So we really invite you to come check out our website. Go to calmclarity.org/events and take advantage of the scholarship programs if you need one so that you can start your journey to experiencing yourself as the best version of you. Are you tired of living in a state of toxic stress? Are you tired of chasing rewards that don't actually give your life much meaning? Are you tired of feeling separated and disconnected? So if you are, maybe it's time to start this journey to experiencing alignment and wholeness, or becoming the highest expression of who you can be. And the most beautiful thing about this journey is you discovering your best qualities and how to radiate more of that quality, more love and more light into the world around you. And this, we've seen transformations in everyone from inner city teens dealing with gun violence to CEOs of major corporations. When you start to move from toxic stress away from tunnel vision into rewiring your brain for wisdom, fulfillment, and joy, you transform the world around you and how your family interacts with you, how your coworkers interact with you. Um, you become you become someone who, like Gandhi says, embodies the change that you want to see in the world. And that's really, really powerful and meaningful and significant. If you're ready to become a conscious co creator, come to our website, check out our calendar of events, take advantage of the scholarship programs we offer. And so, as we come into 2025, my hope is that more and more people say, yes, I'm ready for this. And we're here for you when you are. Thank you.